Niña, yo recuerdo la pena y el dolor y este sentimiento de duda y de rencor. Bella, ya tú sabes, me quiero redimir. Tú tienes la llave que calma mi sufrir y tú te vas, tú te vas. Y yo sin ti, yo sin ti. Y tú te vas, tú te vas. Y yo sin ti, yo sin ti.
Good evening. Vice Chancellor, Professor Ian Chop, Dr. Javier Garcia-Diego, distinguished guests, our visitors from Latin America, Spain, the United States, New Zealand, other distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 9th Biennial Conference of the Association of Iberian and Latin American Studies, Australasia. My name, if you haven't already met me around the conference or other events surrounding the conference, is John Minns, and I'm the Director of the Australian National Centre for Latin American Studies here at the ANU. And this year, for the first time in its 9 conferences, we're hosting the ILASA conference here at the ANU, and we're very pleased and proud to be able to do so. And hope that this is the beginning of a long and deeper engagement with Latin American studies at the ANU in the future. This conference is significant for a number of reasons. Obviously, the date is significant, and that's been talked about in many sessions and in previous events this week, because this is in fact the 3rd day of our conferencing, not in fact the first. First, it marks the 200th anniversary of the beginnings of the struggle for independence, for national independence in Latin America. The outbreak of struggles which eventually sweep across the Latin American region. And this is the great period, really, or the continuation of that great period, the creation of nation states and the beginnings of the ideas of national independence, for good or ill, which shape so much of the world that we see today. And before we go on and explain and give thanks to people for their help in organising this conference, I have to explain that our guest speaker this evening, Najat el Hachmi, who I will be introducing very soon, otherwise has actually left her English language notes for her speech in her hotel room. So there's a mad dash back to University House going on at this very moment. However, we did plan in any case, after Najat's speech, to have a summing up of some of Najat's work by an expert in that field. In fact, the person who suggested that we bring Najat to Australia, Dr. Lilla Thwaites, who's going to speak first rather than second, in order to give her time to get here. But I would like to thank a lot of people for their help in organising the conference, and those of you who were here on Monday night would have already heard a very extensive list of various embassies of Latin American countries. In this case, I'd also like to thank the Embassy of Spain, who provided money to be able to bring Najat and other speakers. We have a number of speakers from Spain here at this conference, and you're very welcome. Also, I'd like to thank particularly the 5 Latin American embassies who date their independence from 1810. If I can not forget them all: Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Venezuela, and Mexico. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the ANU and Professor Ian Chop, because several years ago, when it became clear that there was a question about whether ANCLIS as it was would survive or not, there was really a question about funding and whether it was worth the ANU investing in Latin American studies here. And a decision was made to attempt to do that. And as a result, I think we've made something of a mark, something of a contribution to the field, and we hope to be able to do a lot more. And I'd like to thank Professor Chubb for taking that leap of faith, perhaps, in our ability to do Latin American studies here at the ANU, something to which it was not, I must say, well known in the past. Without going any further, there are a few other people I have to thank. And I thank some of those people in detail on Monday night, but I'll just mention their names again. Essentially, students who've been an extraordinary team Those of you who've been around the conference today, or the Mexico conference over the last 2 days, will have noticed that we've got an extraordinarily efficient and willing team of virtually unpaid slave labour working for these conferences. And what you see here is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the work, because it's been going on for quite some time to plan these conferences, to bring people here, to raise money, to organise papers, to do the printing of catalogues, back. The list is practically endless. And I'll just mention those names again: Petra Wilson-Jones, Guy Emerson, Ben Grono, Jesse Moritz, John Chodor, and probably other people that I've forgotten, who've been a terrific team in organising this conference. So once again, I'd like to thank them and express my appreciation for their help. Rather reversing the order of speakers, first of all, I'd like to introduce Professor Chubb to welcome delegates here to the conference. The first time we've held it, as I've said, and Professor Chubb. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Your Excellencies, guests and new colleagues, of course, students, especially students. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the ANU for this conference of the Association of Iberian and Latin American Studies of Australasia. I've been asked to speak very slowly, but not at length. You're lucky. When I first arrived, I'm well into my 10th year here now, and I remember many things in my first of many events that occurred in my first every year, but some in the first couple of years. And one was some visits from the fearsome group of Latin American ambassadors who came in and fixed me with a stare that was to rivet me to the wall, to talk about how we could help develop, how they could help us develop Latin American studies at the ANU. Before my time here, the ANCLAS was set up. The National Centre for Latin American Studies at ANU was set up. But it had been, I don't know how you could describe it, but not especially active. It existed, it did things, but it wasn't especially active. It didn't drive the relationship between Australia through the ANU and Latin American countries. And the ambassadors, I think, were legitimately concerned that we were not doing enough or not active enough at that time. But it was always sort of fairly difficult to find a way to do that properly. I mean, they reminded me that the connections between Australia and the Hispanic world were growing very rapidly. They reminded me about greater trade and particularly greater investment between our two countries. They introduced me to bankers from Latin American countries, and I got reminded by Australian bankers that there was increasing trade and investment there, and indeed by Australian politicians. They reminded us all of the greater cultural attractions between our countries, with many young Australians particularly growing in their feel and their emotional commitment and connection to the Hispanic world. And that was represented, for example, by their consumption of music, dance, literature and film from this particularly strong and interestingly different from us cultural region. They reminded me of the significance of Spanish as a world language, the second most commonly spoken native language after Mandarin. And at that time we had, I suppose in management jargon you would call it, we had outsourced our teaching of Spanish to another institution. And so our students who took our degrees here could take many languages, many Asian languages, many European languages. But to take Spanish, they had to go to another institution to get that tuition. And I can remember discussing with my colleagues, but also, of course, with the ambassadors and elsewhere in the university. Wouldn't it make sense if we're going to play a serious part in Latin American relationships with Australia, and institution to institution with ANU, that we also taught Spanish here and didn't outsource, send our students somewhere else. So they did say it was a good idea. It's good to know that Vice Chancellors have one every 10 years, and so I had mine then, 9 years ago. We started to teach Spanish language. Crossing the campus the other day, I saw the person whom we employed to teach Spanish language at ANU. And I thought he looked a bit frayed, a bit stooped, a bit tired. I said, how's it going? He said, oh, you know, we've got 500 or more students studying Spanish now at ANU, so it's grown from whatever it was in the first year, 50 to 100 or so, and I think I've saved you. And the 50 to 100 or so to more than 500 now. And whilst I can't say, and I won't say because it might not be the biggest European origin language that we teach, it has to be up there with the very biggest, and I would in fact be surprised if it's not the biggest. The higher education institutions and governments in our region with Latin America are indeed interested in forging closer links, and we at ANU have links with universities in 3 Latin American countries, partly because we encourage our students to take a year abroad in the language in a country which speaks the language they're learning, and they can do that for a semester or a year. And of course a lot are presently in China, and a lot are presently in Vietnam, and Indonesia, and Germany and France, but also of course there are now a lot, particularly in Latin America. We're focused on Latin America because some of our other degrees in the university, some other parts of the university have actually structured their degrees around relationships with Latin American countries. So for example, you can do a degree in international business here where a language is compulsory, but the linkage through that is more focused on Latin America than Europe. So the relationship and hopefully the expansion and the travel across the Pacific, which I've done once, that travel will increase in both directions, as young people particularly travelling to learn more about the language and the culture of the other country and more about the people, particularly of the other country, so that through education we can make the world better rather than leave it to people who simply seek to make it worse. I'd like to pay a tribute to John. The Australian National Centre for Latin American Studies at ANU is doing more than ever and is bringing renewed energy and enthusiasm to the task of establishing and cementing some of those links. And John has been significantly responsible for that. The ANCLAS has gone through some peaks and some troughs over the time that I've been here, and probably before I came here too. But John has taken to the task with a great deal of enthusiasm and energy and spirit, illustrated perhaps best by the fact that he's organised 2 conferences this week, not just one. And most of us as academics hope we can get away with only one in our life. He's done 2 in a week, which is an illustration, I think, of his commitment to this area and to institutional links and academic work in this area. And that's what we are doing, academic work in this area, and it's particularly important if we do want to make the world a better place. So I hope you will enjoy what is probably the largest week of academic activity around Iberian and Latin American studies in Australia. I hope you enjoy your time at ANU. If I were the Prime Minister, I might say welcome to Australia too, for those who live there. But I'll leave that to them. I'll just say welcome to the ANU, which I'm officially delegated and able to do. But you're all very welcome here, and I enjoy the fact that you're going to study and work and discuss important issues that relate to this hemisphere and that hemisphere too. Now I'll make an apology. I'm going to leave, not because I'm not interested and not because I wouldn't like to stay, but I'm moving house. And for those of you who have moved house after 10 years, you'll know exactly what that means. And you'll know that if I don't get back and give my wife a little bit of support, I'll be looking for a new life partner in fairly short order. And I should tell you, I can't even imagine anybody would want to share their lives with me. So I'm going to keep the one I've got. And she's waiting for me over there with keen anticipation. And so I apologise for leaving so quickly, but it doesn't dim or diminish the warmth of my welcome to you, and I hope you have a great time. Thank you.
After a high-speed dash back to the hotel room, I think it's reasonable to give Najat a little time to settle down. And so while I was going to introduce Najat myself very briefly, perhaps a little more extensively, an introduction, and certainly much more adequately, can be given to her work by Lilith Thwaites. I ask Lilith Thwaites.
I'd like to thank the Vice-Chancellor, who's just departed, for partially saving my neck, because there's a bit of a difference between being told at the end you can just say a few words and fill in a bit of a gap while we're waiting for the speaker to get her paper. But I'm delighted to be able to welcome Najat here to Australia. When we were looking for people to bring over from Spain to take advantage of the generosity of the Spanish Embassy with their grant money, there were a number of options, and it just so happened that I had picked up on my visit to Spain a copy of Najat's book in Spanish. Now, she wrote it originally in Catalan. And I started reading it, and I was so fascinated by what I was reading, and I just enjoyed it so much. And my immediate thought, and those of you who know me will understand why it was one of my immediate thoughts, was this has to be translated into English. Partly because not much from Spain is being translated into English, and partly because one of my other lives is as an incipient translator of literature from Spanish into English. Fortunately, probably for the book and for Najat, Peter Bush, whom some of you met last year, who is a wonderful translator, has in fact now translated the novel into English. It has just come out, The Last Patriarch. It's been published by The Serpent's Tail, and if Peter's past translations are anything to go by, I'm sure he will have done her the novel justice. But if I can turn to Najat herself, we actually only met about 25 minutes ago, and if at the time I had thought to say to her, let me have a quick look at your paper beforehand so that I'll have something to think about to say at the end, we would have realised sooner that she didn't have the English version of her paper with her. But anyway, we've spoken for some time on the phone. Like the Vice-Chancellor, Najat has in fact just completed a move. In the week before she came here, she moved house, handed in her second novel to the publishers, and had a long flight here with a 10-year-old son. And those of you who've travelled long distances with children will know exactly what that entails. Children sleep, you don't. So she's had a rather difficult arrival here. We've all been reassuring her that this is by no means a hostile audience, quite the contrary, that her English is perfectly fine, and that in fact we're all looking forward to hearing about a topic that, if the last session I was at is anything to go by, will become one of the topics of this conference, which is that very fraught subject of identity and what identifies you. And if you write in Catalan but were born in Morocco, are you still considered a Catalan writer? And if you happen to write in Catalan within Spain, how are you classified? We had a real conversation when we were talking about doing the publicity for her. She's coming down to Melbourne to do some talks there, and also to Adelaide before she goes to Sydney to do a talk there. How do you describe her? I haven't had a chance to ask her. Does she view herself as a Spanish, Moroccan, Catalan writer, a Catalan writer? Now, this is exactly, I think, part of what she's going to be talking about. I might just take two quotations from Najat herself that I happened to find. I must have known. Someone must have sent down a message saying, you better bring some extra material about her just in case, because I actually brought it with me. One of them, and I'll read it first, I'll read it in Spanish and then I will translate it because I know that some people here aren't Spanish speakers. But it was a quote that caught my eye as I was reading an interview with you. And it's as follows. Con la literatura se pueden conciliar mundos que parecen irreconciliables. Literature can reconcile worlds that seem irreconcilable. I think perhaps is all I'll say for now, and let Najat speak to us on the topic writing from the borderland.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. After really told you all things I've been doing those days, now I understand why I'm so tired, why things are going so bad that I, forget the English version in my room and all that things. I would like to apologize because my English, as you can see, is not very, very good. In my defense, I can say that in my dreams, I speak perfect English. Very fluent and like native. So maybe one day I will be able to do that. Well, as you can see, I'm not an academic, so I'm going to talk about my own experience, and I would like to apologize again if my words, the words I've chosen, are not very accurate. But writers are like that. I choose the title right from the Borderland because it seems to be the place where I've lived longer. Of course, this is a metaphorical space. In my case, this boundary is that drown between Africa and Europe. The wall we call Eastern and Arab Islamic wall between Catalonia and the Reef. That's where I grew up. A space that is both contact and conflict, separation and union. I had the opportunity to think about it during long hours of waiting at the entrance of Morocco in the summers in which we returned. Huddled in the car, surrounded by packages and suitcases, I could see closely the line drawn between the North African Spanish enclave of Melilla and Morocco's northern province. That never made sense, as you can imagine, but that was the perfect place to become a writer, I think. Before I start talking about some topics that are in my first book, Catalana, I would like to introduce myself a little bit. I was born in northern Morocco, the area known as the Reef, a former Spanish protectorate, and a conflicted zone for Hassan II, the king. A rebel zone for people, for the government of Morocco. And one of the phenomena that has affected this area in the last decade is the migration of its inhabitants to other countries. First, they went north to Germany, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, and France. But when Spain became a country needed of workers, then Rifens began to immigrate to there, and especially in Catalonia, where most of the immigrants are from Morocco. So you can imagine, as a result a little bit of this phenomenon, when in 1987 we went to live to Catalonia, my father was already there. There were a few immigrants in the city, so the process was more or less easy. We arrived and within a few days started going to school where they would give us the tools to relate to other people in the city. Not difficult. After a few months, we moved through the neighborhood as if we lived there all our lives. Sorry. We went to a small democratic school last week, looking for a school for my son. I found out that there are lots of schools that define themselves as democratic schools. I don't know. It can be different. I mean, there are schools that are not democratic, but ours was democratic. Well, it was a small school. That taught us values of freedom and equality among people as normal. We learned the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and never felt different from our classmates. The only thing that distinguishes us was that occasionally we had to go to Barcelona. We lived an hour from Barcelona to do some paperwork. For us it was fun as we could miss classes. The other difference was that we used to spend some summers in Morocco, we did not eat pork, and Sunday morning called home to talk with grandma. We were growing, and adolescence brought a crisis to suddenly we felt we were the target of all cultural clashes have or might have. We interpreted that our origins was the problem, which meant our parents were the problem, and therefore everything was a conflict. We wanted to say we're from here. We are already from here, from Catalonia. But no one dared to say this out loud, not to provoke the laughter of the indigenous, the Catalans, and to avoid being like treasons for ours. So we shut up and we continued to feel from here till the moment of truth. We went outside to work and seek our own independence, and we realized that this step that we took, a trip to Barcelona, means something else. For the children of immigrants from foreigners, meant that law could not be allowed to work. I remember vividly the moment when a worker at the employment office said that I could not work in Spain but remain in that country. It seems the most absurd, and I remember we witnessed the text of the Declaration of Human Rights but did not say anything to her. It wasn't her fault. Then there were subtle difficulties to find an apartment, or we were led always to sort kind of works with or without permission. I ended as a cleaner while I was studying. I didn't care. I was going to be a writer, so it was temporary. Meanwhile, the internal discussion did not stop, and I was still looking for answers, trying to find references, people that could clarify my confusion and make it reasonable. At the end, after the birth of my son, that you all met, I realized it was time to stop confusion, so I wrote my first book, Jo també soc catalana, which means I am Catalan too. But the title, even it can seem a little bit aggressive. It does not tell all the truth, but it's not a lie. I mean, of course, I feel like I am Catalan too, but it's just part of the book. The part where I defend the right to belong to where you live. In my case, that's Catalonia. I did not choose to be Catalan. I mean, it's just something that happened to me. Like when you are born, you don't choose the place, and when your parents decide to immigrate, it's the same thing. So maybe if my parents went to, I don't know, Murcia, I would have written a book called I Am Murcia Too. Once I was at a show on TV, at the Andalusian TV, and they said, well, you're from Nador, and Nador is, next to Melilla, which is kind of Andalusia. So maybe you could, write a book called I Am Andalusian Too. Okay, I'm gonna write all the communities in Spain. Well, in that book, in my first book, I tried to think about 5 topics, but well, the last one I'm not gonna. Well, I don't think I want to have them to talk about all of them. But I wanted to think about identity, about languages, about religion, and about women. And I'm going to start with the identity. Well, as you can see, my situation was a perfect to wonder about identity. If all of us ask ourselves these questions, who we are, one time or more in our lives, in the case of immigrants, and especially the sons and daughters of immigrants, this is a key issue. Not only in an existential and philosophical way, but for practical reasons. If I feel belonging to a country, I will behave in a way in that country, and if not, I will behave in another way, of course. Although, when one is growing up and forming his own personality, wondering about oneself, like in our case, we emphasize the conflict by basic idea of always persuading us, and you can understand this, you later. This is, this is to conceive of identity as something close that doesn't change, which is sealed and completely definite and exclusive. Living in a society with that idea of identity, it's uncomfortable, especially because it means 2 things. One, that each individual is bound to be defined. 2, to be one thing prevents you from automatically be another. Like in soccer teams, you cannot play one. I'm sure. This is so obvious that I think it's highly damaging to all of us that are in this space between one and another. In the particular case I'm talking about, society is Catalonia, and the fact that it is a nation without a state. I think it has positive and negative consequences with respect to the definition of what it means to be Catalan. What does it mean to be Catalan? From the in a place where passports are not issued, at least make the bureaucracy non-existent, and that debate on the Catalan identity moves from legal considerations to the more philosophical. Catalonia is continually wondering about itself, self-defining itself, analyzing, and sometimes it's highly stressful, but has the advantage of allowing you to face to face immigration in a more mature way than some nations with state, I think. If there's no state, you could say it's so easy to be Catalan because it just depends on you. You decide to be Catalan or not. Because I think there's no one that can be able to make a definition of what it means to be Catalan. So everybody can be Catalan. It's very easy. But I think it's the same with being Spanish or French. I mean, what does it mean to be Spanish? A part of your passport, or what does it mean to be French? A part of your passport. The difference is in Catalonia, we are always debating about that because there's no physical object to demonstrate that we are or not Catalan. Some years ago, the former president of Generalitat de Catalunya, Jordi Pujol, coined a phrase that became a slogan, which was, "Is Catalan who lives and works in Catalonia." That is it. For me, it was that easy. I mean, myself, when I was 14, I went to a bookstore and got a Catalan identity card, which is, but the fact is, if you consider yourself Catalan, how do you know that Catalan society is going to consider you Catalan? I mean, if they consider you Catalan, that means that you're not going to have more problems with finding a job or finding an apartment and that sort of things, which are important. I mean, okay, maybe they gonna let you speak the language and dance the traditional dances or something, but those are anecdotes that are not. One of the most common fears in Catalonia is to disappear as a nation. That's repeated as a mantra every day, and it's it's a strong feeling that lots of Catalans have. That fear increases a lot when with the arrival of immigrants, especially in recent times, which have come more people. By many Catalans, it is believed that the most normal sense is that the immigrants not care about Catalonia, pass it completely. this fear is very present. Pujol himself, the ex-president, in a conversation we had 2 months ago, he tried to explain it to me with a metaphor about water with salt in it, which is water salted, but maybe one day there's going to be so much salt that it's going to be just humid salt and not honey. And not, he told me that. I mean, and he's a very clever person. He's not. I don't know what's wrong with being humid salt. But I didn't tell him because he was really upset. He was really upset. What I think is that immigrants are not against the Catalan society. I mean, everybody that lives or just visits Catalonia knows that there is a strong feeling of being Catalan. So who's going to kill this? I mean, immigrants are not
Imperial.
And they know the place they're living in, and nobody wants bad things for the place they're winning the bread for their children, especially when their children they growing up in schools where they grow as half Catalans. One of the largest groups of immigrants in Catalonia are Moroccans, and most of them are from this zone I told you, the Rif. The number is so important that most consider the Rif language, the Rifeño, the third language spoken in Catalonia after Catalan and Spanish. Well, Catalan and Spanish, I don't know who's first, but I'm not gonna just start with this quickly. The Amazigh identity has more problems than the Catalan identity. It's not only the absence of a state, but the fact that Amazighs are scattered through North Africa. Some speakers, for example, some people speak about Amazigh independence, like making a parallelism between Catalan movement for independence and Amazigh movement for independence. But that's absurd, because if you want the independence of Amazighs from Morocco, then you need the independence of all Morocco from Morocco, because almost all Morocco is Amazigh. I mean, people doesn't know exactly how many Amazighs are in Morocco, but some say that 80% or something. And you can recognize this because of language, but if you consider other things, maybe they're everybody. Then, to be Rifeño, it involves some complications that I mean, the first complications they have is like, well, you cannot say what defines a Rifeño, who's Rifeño, who's not. The only thing I knew when I was a little is that being Rifeño was not being Arab, so it was this kind of opposition. The other issue related to the identity, I've always thought about is about the immigration study. Before, I've done the distinction between immigrants and children of immigrants. I think the difference is substantial. We do not decide, I mean the sons and daughters of immigrants, anything. We do not take decisions to migrate, so we're not immigrants. It's a poor coincidence that our parents decide to bring us with them. The only thing is that sometimes we feel more immigrants than them. And they, our parents, I think they moved with a kind of naive view of the process of immigrating, the change that means. I mean, they always believe that it's not going to change anything. We're just moving and working and having more money, and that's all. And we'll remain the same people. And of course, you never remain the same. I mean, living a certain time in a country that makes you different, and if your children grow up in this country, involves some major changes. They will be the result of a society that's not yours, and they're going to become something that you don't know, or you don't. Parent-child conflict are increased by this context. I mean, there's always conflict between parents and sons and daughters. Well, a little bit what happens in the novel The Last Patriarch, with other elements. Well, what I mean with this is that being children of immigrants, it's like being a suitcase that they brought. And at the same time, you are more, or sometimes you feel more immigrants than them, because you can understand better the language, better the context, and you, I don't know, you are more suspicious sometimes, or more, and you feel the fears of people and the requirements for integration. In addition, we are usually more sensitive to discrimination because we are half foreigners. Sometimes I think that our parents felt normal, that society that welcomed them treated them differently, because after all, as they say, it's their land, it's not ours. But we don't have any other land, so. There's another question I cannot answer concerning to immigrant status. I asked sociologists, scholars, and people, and each one gave me a different answer, and no one was really clear. The question is, when do you end to be an immigrant? Is it lifelong condition? Is it inherited? Of course, you have heard the term second generation, referring to the children of immigrants, and third, fourth, etc. This means that these families are not incorporated to the new society, and people are still making this difference. I thought I was no longer an immigrant when I decided, but it is also true that the fact that people around you see you as an immigrant is very important. if I tell you something, I mean, what's difficult is to be looked as part of the new society. I've written this book and I won a prize, one of the most something in Catalonia. And then if you've never been in Catalonia, there's a day, the 23rd April, the day, the book's day, where all the authors are in the streets signing books, signing their books, of course. And there are lots of protests. It's a nice thing to see. And I had a lady coming with one of my books written in Catalan, and she started to talk to me in Spanish, not in Catalan, and very slowly, because, I couldn't understand her. And I said, oh my God, I've written this book. But she's still, no. The funniest part, of this is that this status of immigrant, when you lose it, it's not permanent. I mean, you can become an immigrant again so fast. For example, I write articles on the newspaper, and when I talk about Catalan language, and I defend the Catalan language or Catalan literature, everybody's so happy. I'm so integrated to the Catalan society. But when I write articles about religious freedom, or I complain about the treatment of the Muslims, then I become, I don't know, disintegrated. Kind of the peasant who's coming from the Cabilia, and she wants to give us lessons or something. So, well, despite all this, I assure you that in general, I think by daily life, I would say the balance is rated positive. I'm not saying it because there's no balance here, so I can say it here. I mean, when there is direct contact with individuals and not with preconceived ideas, then everything changes. Another doubt I have about this sort of identity and the status of immigrants, it's the idea of communities. I know that this word is used so often, but I don't understand it well. I mean, neither in Catalan nor in English. I've always wondered what is a community and how can you define it? I mean, where does a community start and where it ends? Who's in the community or who's out of the community? I mean, the Moroccan community of Catalonia. I am a member of this community or not? Is my son a member of this community or not? And the question is there anything in common among all those people that were born in the same place? I mean, does it mean that we think the same way, or I don't know. I know some Moroccans that I cannot, think like them, but maybe this idea of communities is more useful for politicians and for the governments to have a group defined, and then you have representatives of these groups, and presidents of associations of something, associations that maybe are just of few Moroccans, and the other they even don't know it. And what I was telling is that it's very useful for governments, because then they can have representatives without something very important for a democratical system, which is the right to vote and to decide on your own which your representative in the government. I mean, it's very funny because there is a Moroccan parliament at the parliament, and everybody thinks that he is the Moroccan in the parliament, but you cannot be a Moroccan in the parliament because you should be Spanish to be in the parliament. So, and I don't know. They try to convince us that he is our representative at the government. He's not my representative. I don't know what's his ideology and all that stuff. And it doesn't mean that because he's Moroccan, I'll be happy because and I don't like him. Well, anyway, I can tell you something. I had 2 passports, and well, I don't know if I'm able to say that because the Spanish ambassador is here. Maybe they're gonna take my passport. But I had 2 passports, and none of them resolved the conflict, the identity conflict. Of course, the Moroccan didn't, because I had it for it was so far from Catalonia. But Spanish neither, because sometimes people ask me about, they always asking you, how do you feel? If you feel Catalan, if you feel Spanish, and you don't know what to answer, and I answer the truth. But well, so on TV they always get this answer. But I say that, for me being Spanish is such a I don't know, it's something really abstract for me. I mean, it's passport that I fight a lot to have because it took me 20 years to have the passport. But it's nothing else because my world, my interest was basically Catalan. Of course, if you consider being Spanish, as being Catalan, then maybe I could feel Spanish. But the idea of being Spanish that I found in many people, it's completely different. I mean, I think there is a serious problem with the diversity in Spain. I mean, that's. I was in New York with the director of the art house in Madrid, and she said that there was any difference in Spain after the expulsion of the Morisques and I said, hey, I'm here and I write in Catalan, I'm quite different. This idea of diversity, I think it's going to take a long to accept the diversity of the immigrants, because most of people in Spain, they still don't accept their own diversity, so it's going to be difficult. There's something that Moroccan government has been making very actively in recent years. This is to claim the Moroccans that are living abroad. A few years ago, the government created the Foundation for Moroccan Workers Abroad, which was called Hassan II, which I find very funny because most of the people that left was thanks to him. So, but also they created the Ministry of Moroccans Living Abroad. They organized meetings in different countries and tried to convince us that we should participate and we should look to our country, our land, and all that stuff. I believe that this claim reflects the poorly economic interest. I mean, part of the Moroccan economy is sustained by remittances of immigrants from families living abroad. At the time, the children of immigrants no longer feel tied to their origins. The first thing they will do is to stop sending money. And here you have proof. Neither me or my brothers and sisters have never sent a penny to Morocco. The families, I think they play a little bit this game. They always reminding us, our land. That's very romantic, but after the land, there is Western Union to send money if you don't know. And well, this seems very complicated. Having to negotiate every moment with all these fragments is very tiring. I think sooner or later, even those who came to Catalonia elder than us, they decide to take root. So, and it's exhausting to live like in a virtual identity. Like I am still from there, but I'm living here. And, I think that's ending. I mean, some years ago, we all used to say we'll go back, but now most of us say we're going home, and home is not in Morocco, it's in Catalonia. I mean, my own mother, who came to Catalonia when she was 30-something, nearly 30, and now she has to spend lots of time in Morocco, and she doesn't like it. I mean, her house is in Catalonia, and I don't know what time. I've just finished one of the 4th pass. Lilith, I'll be better in Melbourne. Sorry. I'm sorry, John. I wanted to speak a little bit about language, because this story doesn't end with the Catalan and being Catalan language and blah, blah, blah. The most interesting thing is I am, as I said, I am a Mazik. A Mazik is a language that survived years without other support than the voice between different countries. Influenced by various conquerors and invaded, It extends through Morocco, Algeria, Mauritania, and Tunisia. There are different dialect communities, but these dialects are so remote one from each other that are barely intercomprehensible. I mean, I cannot speak with the Amazigh from the Atlas. The one who's in, no, that's, the Amazigh language is, as I said, a language that's not written, and of course not taught at schools. You don't need to be a socio-linguistic to realize that this is a big problem for children that are not able to learn their own language at school. The language of mothers in Morocco is practically invisible in the educational system. Of course, if you have an oral language and you want to teach it at school, you need someone to can put it in writing and lay down common rules to be able to. Something, very funny happened to me with that. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to make a small, very small news program on the Catalan radio in Amazigh. And it was a very interesting experience because I could, learn about all Amazigh's residents in Catalonia, and I think I quite reconciliated with my mother language, but I had many difficulties. To start, I had never heard Amazigh radio program, so it was everything from the beginning. To follow my vocabulary in Amazigh wasn't very rich because the language I used to speak with my parents was like just familiar language, not the communicative situations were a lot. Then I had to speak about the news in the world. Wars and politics and all that stuff. And I couldn't find the words in Amazigh because they don't exist, or I never heard them. And then I had another problem, which is I had to write down where I prepared to say at the radio, but I didn't know how. And then I've written in Latin characters as I can hear it. But then when I was at the radio station, I couldn't understand anything because it's kind of, it sounds like that, but then. I can say that gradually I refined the transcripts, and finally I could do some fast work. I'm so sorry. Perhaps, maybe not. You wonder how this kind of language can communicate in the distance. And before the days of, before the internet, and some years ago in this area, in the Reef, telephone phones were like luxury accessories or something. So I remember the system my family used to send messages from the Rif to Catalonia. There was the possibility to write a letter in standard Arabic and then translate it. Didn't work. What we used to do is to record tapes, cassettes, with a message, and then it was really exciting to hear some voices coming from so far. But now everything has changed. People are using phones, but the number of people that are using internet to communicate in Amazigh has increased a lot. I've seen ladies reading donkeys to go to take water, and then the Sundays in the morning go to the city and talk with the son in Netherlands by messenger or Skype. It is curious, but the internet has had importance for Amazighs. In recent years, there has been an explosion of web pages in this language. And a few years ago, I think the movement of the Amazighs is growing. First, they were Rifens that went to college. They become aware of the importance of their own legacy. Now, I think that's spreading to other people. There's an important movement, a part of internet, with people that wants to normalize the situation of Amazigh. After the death of Hassan II, his son created the IRCAM, which is the Royal Institute for the Amazigh Language and Culture. And that was supposed to be the organization to make a standard for the Amazighs, but it didn't work, I think, because there were discussions between people coming from different areas of Amazigh, and they were even terras. I don't know it in English, but now they're not. Well, they started to teach some Amazigh at schools, but it's really strange because I've seen the books and they're teaching. For example, in the Rif, they're teaching the Amazigh of the Atlas, and then children are like a bit confused because they're supposed to be learning their own language, and then they realize that they don't know even their own language. So okay, I don't know where I'm going to say. There's something important I would like to say about that language. When I ask myself why I write, or somebody asks me, because there's lots of people that ask you, why do you write? I always thought that it was because when I arrived at Catalonia at the age of 8, I discovered the library, and then I just read all the books that I could find. And I thought it was just because I read a lot. Then I forgot something, why I was reading so much. And it's because in this immigration process, you lose lots of things. And one of the things that we lost is something that we never thought that was that important, which is the oral literature of the woman in this area. I never thought that it was so important that all the literature I had around during my childhood, because it was just it wasn't written, so for me it wasn't literature. But many years ago, I realized that this was a very, very important part of my, of my process of learning literature. And what I wanted to say is what is really interesting in this literature is that it's something that just women in Peru have the power to do. I mean, I don't know what happens in other places, but in this area, it's the women who tell stories, and the women who it's not just tells for children. It's oral novels. I mean, I remember my mother and all of us, and me and my brothers then sleeping together, one next to another, in the darkness. And then my mother started to tell the story from the beginning. And I can tell you now, right now, I can see the images I made by the description she made of the story. I can see the characters, I can see the actions, even it's been so long ago. So, I don't know, I wanted to talk about the woman, which is a thing that it's very important for me, but
Next time.
next time. I'm so sorry for all that.